The morning sun glinted off the cobblestones of Buckingham Palace's courtyard, where tourists were already buzzing with excitement, cameras poised to capture the timeless spectacle of the changing of the guard. Among the crowd, one man stood out, Ryan Chen, a martial arts legend whose swagger and designer tracksuit screamed confidence. At 32, he was a 3-time international champion. His California dojo's a testament to his success. His Instagram bio a bold declaration, undefeated, untouchable, unstoppable. But today, Ryan wasn't here to admire tradition. He was here to make a statement. And what happened next would leave the crowd speechless, as years of arrogance collided with a reality he never saw coming. Ryan surveyed the scene, his sharp eyes locking onto guard William Harrington, standing rigid in his scarlet tunic and bearskin cap. To Ryan, the guard was a relic, a statue frozen in ceremonial stillness. "This is what they call security?" he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. His 4 training partners, loyal disciples of Chen's elite combat system, formed a tight semicircle around him, their matching jackets a silent flex of their allegiance. They were fighters, forged in the crucible of tournament rings, not bound by the stiff traditions of this old-world display. "Look at this guy," Ryan said, smirking. "No movement, no defense. In my world, a fighter who stands still is begging to get knocked out." The crowd began to notice Ryan's group, their energy a stark contrast to the quiet reverence of the tourists. A few onlookers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the brewing tension. Among them was Colonel James Thornton, a retired Royal Marines officer with 30 years of service etched into his weathered face. His medals, pinned discreetly to his coat, caught the morning light as he paused his walk, his instincts flaring. He'd seen men like Ryan before, cocky, eager to prove a point, blind to the consequences. Thornton's eyes narrowed, but he stayed silent, watching. Ryan's voice grew louder, his gestures more theatrical. This guard's posture, completely vulnerable, no center of gravity, no readiness. All this ceremonial nonsense would get him destroyed in a real fight. His partners nodded, feeding his bravado. One of them, a wiry fighter named Marcus, grinned. "Remember Tokyo? That Swedish champ didn't last 40 seconds against you." Ryan's lips curled into a smug smile as he rolled his shoulders, muscles rippling under his tracksuit. He was in his element now, a champion sizing up an unworthy opponent. Harrington, meanwhile, remained motionless, his face a mask of discipline. At 28, he was no stranger to pressure. 8 years in the British Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan, and a covert operation in Syria had earned him a quiet medal ceremony at the Ministry of Defense. But to Ryan, he was just a prop, a symbol of outdated tradition. "Let me show you what a real fighter looks like," Ryan declared, stepping closer to the guard. He dropped into a fluid stance, his movements honed by thousands of hours in the ring. A real fighter is always ready, always moving, always aware. The crowd thickened, drawn by the spectacle. Some tourists looked uneasy, others intrigued, a few snapping photos of the unexpected show. Ryan began circling Harrington, his steps deliberate, his voice carrying like a ringside announcer. "Look at this guy. They've trained all the fight out of him. In a real combat situation, this rigidity is a death sentence." He threw a series of quick jabs, stopping inches from Harrington's face, showcasing his precision. The crowd gasped, a mix of awe and discomfort rippling through them. A German family quietly pulled their children away, sensing the line Ryan was about to cross. Colonel Thornton edged closer, his military bearing parting the crowd. He recognized the danger in Ryan's escalating display, not to Harrington, but to Ryan himself. The martial artist was playing a game he didn't understand, taunting a man whose stillness wasn't weakness, but a coiled spring of lethal capability. Ryan, oblivious, pressed on. "What we're seeing here is the difference between ceremony and combat," he said, gesturing to Harrington like a museum exhibit. "These guards are performers, not fighters." Ryan's performance was now in full swing, his training partners forming a loose ring around Harrington, their presence turning the courtyard into an impromptu arena. "This is Jin," Ryan said, pointing to a towering figure with taped hands, 3-time international kickboxing champion, and Marcus, former MMA welterweight title holder. "We train fighters who win real combat sports, not soldiers who play dress-up." The crowd murmured, some entertained, others visibly tense. An elderly woman with a veteran's pin on her coat shook her head, her disapproval silent but palpable. Ryan's movements grew bolder, his voice booming. "Watch how a real fighter moves!" He unleashed a flurry of punches, each stopping just short of Harrington's chest, his control impeccable. Every move has purpose, intent, lethal potential. Nothing wasted, nothing for show. The crowd was silent now, the air thick with anticipation. Thornton pushed forward, his expression grim. He knew what Ryan didn't. Harrington wasn't just a guard. He was a combat veteran, a member of the Special Reconnaissance Regiment with 4 deployments and 2 distinguished service commendations. This wasn't a demonstration. It was a provocation. Ryan's taunts grew sharper. "Military training is about groupthink. Follow orders, maintain formation, sacrifice individuality. Martial arts is about personal excellence, pushing human limits." He executed a spinning kick, the motion whistling past Harrington's ear, close enough to stir the air. The crowd recoiled, a collective gasp breaking the silence. "Notice he doesn't even blink," Ryan said, his tone mocking. "That's not discipline. That's fear. Fear of breaking rules, of thinking for himself." A woman with a young daughter pulled her child away, muttering, "This is disrespectful." Others followed, but many stayed, unable to tear their eyes from the escalating drama. Ryan, feeding off the attention, announced, "Time for a practical demonstration. Theory's fine, but experience teaches best." He began a meticulous warm-up, stretching his neck and shoulders with the ease of a man who dominated countless opponents. "I'm going to show you why static defense, like this guard's, is obsolete against modern combat techniques." Thornton tried to intervene, but Ryan's partners closed ranks. One of them, a heavy-set man with a fighter's broken nose, placing a hand on the colonel's chest. "Let the demonstration finish, old-timer," he said, his tone casual but firm. Thornton's eyes flashed. "That guard is not what you think," he warned quietly. "Your friend is making a serious mistake." But Ryan was too far gone, his focus locked on Harrington, his stance shifting into a competition-ready posture. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan called, his voice ringing with authority. In a real fight, situational awareness is everything. This guard has surrendered his to ceremony. He launched into a complex approach sequence, his movements a blur of precision. A defender who won't adapt, who can't respond, who's rigid in outdated protocols. His words were cut off as he unleashed a spinning heel kick aimed directly at Harrington's face. The crack of impact echoed like a gunshot, the bearskin cap flying in a dramatic arc against the London sky. The crowd froze, time stretching as the cap hit the stones with a dull thud. Ryan landed smoothly, a triumphant grin forming. "And that," he began, "is why." His words died as he saw Harrington. The guard hadn't fallen. His head had snapped sideways, a thin line of blood tracing from his temple, but his body held firm, his eyes now locked on Ryan's with a cold, focused intensity that sent a chill through the martial artist. "Oh," one of Ryan's partners whispered, the bravado draining from his voice. The crowd held its breath, the silence deafening. Thornton, now on his phone, paused, his expression shifting to grim anticipation. Then Harrington moved, not with the clumsiness of a ceremonial figure, but with the lethal precision of a predator honed in war zones. His rifle clattered to the ground as he closed the distance to Ryan in a heartbeat, his speed defying his formal attire. Ryan, to his credit, reacted instantly, dropping into a defensive stance. "Now we're talking," he said, forcing confidence into his voice. "Let's see what they teach you soldiers." But Harrington's first strike silenced him. A textbook combat move, delivered with brutal efficiency. Ryan blocked, but the force sent him staggering. The guard's movements were devoid of flair, each action calculated for maximum effect, like a machine executing a lethal program. There was no posturing, no theatrics, just the relentless precision of a man who'd fought in shadows where survival was the only prize. Ryan, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity, scrambled to regain his footing, his tournament-honed instincts kicking in. He launched a counterstrike, a crisp jab aimed at Harrington's chest, but the guard sidestepped with eerie calm, redirecting Ryan's momentum with a subtle twist of his wrist. The martial artist stumbled, his confidence fraying at the edges. The crowd, now a tight knot of stunned onlookers, watched in breathless silence. Smartphones were raised, capturing every second of the surreal clash, but the atmosphere was no longer one of entertainment. It was awe, tinged with unease, as if the courtyard had transformed into a stage for a lesson no one had expected. Ryan's training partners, their bravado evaporating, exchanged uneasy glances, their formation loosening as they sensed the tide turning. Colonel Thornton, standing at the crowd's edge, folded his arms, his face a mask of quiet satisfaction. He'd seen this before, not in palace courtyards, but in training grounds and battlefields where discipline trumped ego every time. Harrington pressed forward, his strikes relentless, yet controlled, each once landing with the weight of experience Ryan couldn't match. A low sweep targeted Ryan's legs, forcing him to jump back. But Harrington anticipated the move, closing the gap with a palm strike that caught Ryan's shoulder, spinning him off balance. The martial artist's breath came in sharp gasps, his polished technique unraveling against the guard's raw, utilitarian combat style. "Come on!" Ryan growled, more to himself than his opponent, as he attempted a spinning kick, a move that had felled champions in glittering arenas. Harrington caught the leg mid-air, his grip like iron, and with a single fluid motion, drove Ryan to the ground. The impact echoed across the courtyard, knocking the air from Ryan's lungs. Harrington dropped to one knee, pinning Ryan's sternum with just enough pressure to immobilize him, his face as impassive as it had been during the kick to his own head. The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the tourists. A British father instinctively pulled his children closer, while an elderly man with a regimental tie nodded slowly, as if witnessing a truth he'd long understood. Ryan struggled, his fighter's instincts urging him to break free, but every attempt was met with subtle adjustments from Harrington, rendering his strength useless. "Stay down," Harrington said, his voice low and commanding, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This ends now." The words weren't a taunt, but a directive, delivered with the same calm focus that had guided him through firefights and covert missions. Ryan's eyes widened, a flicker of humiliation crossing his face as he realized he was outmatched. Not by flash or showmanship, but by a depth of skill he hadn't anticipated. Colonel Thornton stepped forward, Ryan's entourage parting instinctively under his authoritative presence. "I believe," he said, addressing Ryan with a tone that blended civility with steel. "You've just received a masterclass in the difference between sport and survival." His words were measured, but they cut through the tension like a blade. Guard Harrington could do far more than he's shown, but restraint is part of his training, something your approach seems to lack. Ryan, still pinned, managed a strained retort. "What the hell? You can't—" Thornton cut him off, his voice unwavering. Guard Harrington can and has done considerably more than neutralize a civilian with an inflated sense of his own abilities. Before this post, he served with the Special Reconnaissance Regiment, 4 combat deployments, 2 distinguished service commendations. He paused, letting the weight of Harrington's credentials sink in. "The ceremonial duties you mocked require the highest discipline from soldiers who've already proven themselves where your tournament trophies mean nothing." The crowd murmured, a mix of respect and disbelief. Palace security personnel arrived, their boots clicking sharply on the cobblestones, radios crackling with urgent chatter. Their commander, a wiry officer with a no-nonsense demeanor, assessed the scene. The bearskin cap on the ground, the faint streak of blood on Harrington's cheek, Ryan pinned beneath him. "Colonel Thornton, sir," the officer said, offering a crisp nod. "We'll take it from here." Thornton inclined his head. "I believe Guard Harrington has the situation under control, Lieutenant. Mr. Chin here decided to test the Queen's Guard in a rather ill-advised manner." The officer's expression hardened as he took in the details. "Assault on a serving member of His Majesty's forces," he said, his voice clipped. "That's a serious offense." "Indeed," Thornton agreed, "and I suspect the Crown Prosecution Service will have a few additional charges to add." Harrington, at a subtle nod from his commander, released Ryan and rose to his feet, resuming his parade ground posture despite the absence of his cap. The martial artist struggled to his knees, his designer tracksuit scuffed, his ego battered far worse than his body. The crowd, now maintaining a respectful distance, watched in silence, their earlier curiosity replaced by a dawning understanding of the guard's true capabilities. As the security team escorted Ryan away, the courtyard began to settle, though the air still hummed with the weight of what had transpired. Tourists whispered among themselves, some replaying their videos, others debating what they'd just seen. Harrington, now tended by a palace medic who cleaned the blood from his cheek, stood motionless, his discipline unbroken even as the antiseptic stung. The medic, a young woman with a practiced touch, murmured, "You took that kick like it was nothing." Harrington's only response was a slight nod, his eyes fixed forward, as if the courtyard were a battlefield and he were still on duty. Colonel Thornton lingered, addressing the crowd that had reformed around him. His voice carried the gravitas of a man who'd spent decades commanding respect. "The uniform guard Harrington wears," he said, gesturing to the soldier, "is not a costume. It's a symbol of service, earned through the same grueling training that produces our nation's elite forces." An American tourist, his cap emblazoned with a baseball logo, raised a hand. "But why have soldiers like him just standing there? Seems like a waste of talent." Thornton's smile was patient, almost paternal. "A fair question, but it misses the point. These ceremonial duties rotate among active duty units. The soldier standing guard today could have been on a counter-terrorism op 6 months ago and might be deployed to a war zone 6 months from now. Their stillness isn't a parlor trick. It's a testament to the discipline that makes them lethal when the situation demands it." A local woman, her accent sharp with London pride, spoke up. Why didn't he react sooner? He just took that kick without moving. Thornton nodded, as if expecting the question. Protocol governs when a guard may break ceremony. They're trained to distinguish between provocation and genuine threat, to exercise restraint until the line is crossed. Guard Harrington responded only when directly assaulted, and even then, his actions were precise. Designed to neutralize, not destroy. The crowd absorbed this, their perception of the guards shifting. The bearskin caps and scarlet tunics, once mere photo ops, now carried a deeper significance. Thornton continued, his voice steady. To stand guard here is one of the highest honors in military service. These men are chosen not just for their precision, but for their exemplary records, combat decorations that far outshine any tournament medal. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Harrington was relieved from his post, moving with the same fluid precision that had dismantled Ryan's assault. Inside the guard quarters, he changed into standard combat fatigues, the ceremonial garb replaced by the practical attire of a soldier. A military physician examined the cut on his temple, noting with approval how Harrington had instinctively turned his head to minimize the kick's impact. Textbook defensive reaction, the doctor said, applying antiseptic. Harrington merely nodded, the motion as economical as his combat response. He'd faced worse: explosions, ambushes, missions where hesitation meant death. A kick, even one from a champion, was trivial by comparison. In the security office, Ryan sat alone, his tracksuit rumpled, his championship swagger replaced by a quiet reckoning. The weight of impending charges, assault, disruption of ceremonial duties, and more pressed heavily on him. When Harrington entered, now in his combat uniform, Ryan stood, his posture no longer defiant but respectful. "Guard Harrington," the security officer said. "Mr. Chen requested this meeting before we proceed with processing." Harrington nodded, taking a seat across from Ryan, his posture ramrod straight. The two men studied each other, the air thick with unspoken understanding. "That was SRR training, wasn't it?" Ryan asked, his voice stripped of its earlier bravado. "I've sparred with special forces from 3 countries. Never seen anything like what you did." "We adapt techniques to operational needs," Harrington replied, his tone neutral, neither confirming nor denying his elite background. Ryan gave a humorless laugh. "Operational needs. Right." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I screwed up. Misjudged you completely. Saw you standing there and thought, a target, not a professional." Harrington's expression didn't change, but his silence invited Ryan to continue. "In my world, it's about proving you're the best, showing off for the crowd. I didn't see what was right in front of me." He paused, his voice softening. "That stillness, I thought it was just tradition. But it's control, isn't it?" "The same control that lets us stand for hours," Harrington said, "lets us act without hesitation when it counts." Ryan nodded, absorbing the lesson. "They're going to throw the book at me, aren't they?" he asked, glancing at the door. "Likely," Harrington said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Assaulting a guard on duty isn't taken lightly." Ryan straightened, accepting the consequences with a competitor's resolve. "Fair enough. I earned it. But for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the kick, but for the disrespect. For not seeing you." Harrington studied him, then gave a single nod. "Acknowledged." As he stood to leave, Ryan spoke again. "One last thing. That kick. Most guys would have gone down. You barely moved. How?" Harrington paused, a flicker of professional respect in his eyes. "When you've survived IEDs, a kick to the face is just another Tuesday." He left, returning to his duties, while Ryan sat in silence, grappling with a new understanding of strength. The next day, Harrington stood at his post, his bearskin cap restored, his uniform pristine. The tourists, now more subdued, kept a respectful distance, their cameras less intrusive, their whispers tinged with admiration. Colonel Thornton, passing by, paused to nod in approval. Sometimes he mused. The most powerful lessons were taught not with words, but with actions that shattered illusions. What would you have done in Ryan's shoes? Would you have seen past the uniform to the warrior beneath, or mistaken discipline for weakness? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story opened your eyes to the Royal Guard's true strength, give it a like. Subscribe for more stories that peel back the curtain on tradition, and hit that bell to never miss a video.